Welcome to Blackbriar Gaming. In today's Old World Almanac video, we've got the fight the good fight in the combat phase. So we're looking at what happens in close combat. We had shooting last week, movement before it. It'll be break test and morale next week, although we get to look in psychology next week, but we get a little look at what that might look like today as well. And it's looking really interesting. So far, let's scroll down and look at this amazing artwork. I just love this piece of artwork. This really sums up Warhammer Fantasy for me. The bright, vibrant colors going along with the grim bloodshed. It's fantastic. So far in the run-up to the Old World, we've prepared for battle in the strategy phase, jockeyed for position in the movement phase, and darkened the sky with arrows. It's now time to get to the grimmest business of all, slinging swords and shouldering pikes in the combat phase. Now, it's got 4 phases as well: choose and fight, calculate results, break tests, and pursuit. Very good. You begin the phase by choosing which combat you want to fight. In general, fighting happens in ranks. This is an interesting new change, and only the first rank of an engaged unit can fight. Now, in 8th edition, it was 2 ranks. Here we've got the first rank. Another change is, however, a unit with a wider fighting rank than its opponent can still attack with every model in that rank. Your troops surround and envelop the other regiment. Interesting. So there are plenty of wrinkles to this, so there's a lot of complexity that goes around it. Interesting with that front rank piece fighting, it sounds like models not in base combat, and I assume base contact, there we go. And I assume that's for front rank as well, only get 1 attack. So even when there's rules with second and potentially third rank fighting for certain weapons, let's say, or certain units, it'll only be 1 attack, much like in 8th edition. And potentially that first rank, if those individual models on the flanks of the unit are not in base contact, let's say it's a frontage of 10 against a frontage of 5, those extra few models on each side will only get 1 attack as well, which just balances out a little, which I think is really nice. But that actually, it says that in the article, we'll get there. Now, some models may make supporting attacks from a deeper rank. Yes, multiple units can be engaged in the same combat, and any model that is able to fight without being in base contact may only make 1 attack this turn. There we go. Didn't have to read that much further, but got ranty. It happens. So, let's see. The deeper ranks, I dare say, we'll be talking about spears and pikes and whatnot. Certain units will be able to do that, but for the majority, it sounds like only the front rank will fight, which I think will be good because it will result in less casualties, which will then result in less extreme break tests, which I think is a positive thing. So this game will be less about absolutely murdering your opponent and more about maneuver and overwhelming and taking advantage of psychology, which I like. I really like that. It really differentiates it from GW's other games. Wow, we're all over the place. So, once you've worked out who can fight, it's time to determine initiative for each model and see who strikes first. The model with the highest initiative strikes first, and so on down the order. With a bonus, this is different, with a bonus for charging and a bigger one for hitting them in the flank or rear. Now, it used to be that for charging and hitting them in the flank or rear, it gave combat bonuses, but now it looks like, and I think it still does, I think we get there soon, but now it also, or let's just double check so we can say, make sure we're saying the same thing. Rank bonus, standard, high ground, rear attack, flank attack. There you go. So flank attack, still get +1 to your combat results. It doesn't look like you get a +1 for charging now. Instead, what you do is get the higher initiative, which I really like. So it used to feel a little strange that your cavalry charges into a unit and then kind of does nothing while your opponent attacks first and kills all your units. Now, it sounds like there's still a chance that will happen. The example it gives here is the sword masters against a stone troll, that even when the stone troll is charging, the initiative 6 over initiative 1 will still go first. So it won't be automatic goes first, which I also like, because that would seem strange, but it does give, by the sounds of it, a considerable initiative bonus, probably more than +1. By the looks of it, could be +2, +3 initiative bonus to that charging unit. So it really gives a nice bonus to that unit that charges for the player, which maneuvers correctly and gets those charges off, but isn't completely overwhelming and broken. Some really nice mechanics that we're seeing so far. Flank and rear as well, getting initiative bonus. I really like that as well. Once again, it's encouraging and rewarding maneuver and clever tactical play. Now, there could be a situation, however, just as I said, the stone troll may find itself striking second on the charge against something like initiative 6. That's fine. That makes a lot of sense. Now, weapon skills and rolling to hit. The big news here is that we're back to weapon skill charts, just like we saw with Horus Heresy. We're seeing it with the old world. They're reverting back to the weapon skill charts. Absolutely fine. It hasn't followed the trend of Horus Heresy, whereby weapon skill 5 becomes absolutely overwhelmingly powerful. This is very much, I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, an exact replica of that 8th edition 2-hit chart, which is fine. Yeah, this is absolutely fine. All right, so we go on down. I'm not going to go into detail on that. We've all seen weapon skill charts before. Now, you may roll as many dice as your engaged models have attacks, and with the higher initiative models striking first. A charging unit has the opportunity to overwhelm its enemies before they have the wit to swing back. Now, some people are saying that this implies that if you kill a bunch of models, the front rank of the unit that's striking back does not get to fight back with that amount of models. Thereby, you can essentially wipe out the front rank of an enemy unit, and they don't get to attack back, like in previous editions of Warhammer Fantasy. I'm not a fan of that. I hope it's not that way. I don't think it is. I think this is more implying, essentially, if you run down an enemy unit and kill all of them, they're not going to get to attack back, as opposed to just the front rank. The step-up rule from 8th edition, I think, will carry over into this edition. I'd be very surprised if it didn't, but we'll have to wait and see. You could argue from that sentence either way. Now, next, you roll to wound and make armor saves as normal. Casualties are removed from the back ranks, representing the rear ranks stepping forward, and this is why I think the step-up rule is still there, stepping forward as their comrades bite the dirt. Set every death in each unit aside. You'll need to total, I believe that was meant to say, them up for the next step, which is calculating the combat results. So there you go. You heard it here first. Step up, I believe, is still going to be in, and probably not first. You heard it here as well as some other people. And I believe you will not be able to kill the whole front rank and not have your opponent fight back. So calculating the combat results. One side or the other makes a breakthrough, and the loser is pushed back or breaks. Unlike in other Warhammer games, you don't flee based on your leadership alone. You have to calculate the combat result. Yeah, pretty similar stuff, but this is where it starts to get different. Now, it's not just how many deaths you've caused. You get bonuses for complete ranks, for having the high ground, for standard bearers, and for attacking the side or rear. That's pretty similar. Overkill is yep, that applies to challenges and whatnot. So that's all pretty standard, but now when we get into the break tests, things get real interesting, and I think for the better. Now, add it all up and see who's won. If it's a draw, combat continues next turn, but if there's a clear loser, they must take a break test. This is a leadership test modified by how much you lost the combat by, and with several outcomes. If the natural roll is higher than the leadership stat of the test unit's leader, then the unit breaks and flees. Run away, you can get chased down and killed. This is the interesting one. If the modified roll is higher than the leadership stat, but the natural roll is lower, the unit falls back in good order. So it almost gives them a little pseudo-stubborn situation, whereby you're stubborn for the fact that, and the old stubborn rule whereby your leadership wasn't modified by combat result. Essentially, yes, you fall back still, but you don't get chased down and wiped out, is what we're assuming that means there. Now, if the modified result is lower than the leadership stat, or if you roll a double 1, the unit gives ground. So you don't just stand there and do nothing, you do give a bit of ground, and I'm really interested in this give ground. I don't think this article says how much ground you give. It might be your movement, it might be half your movement, it might be a set 3 inches. Whatever it is, I think it's really interesting and adds some real tactical complexity to this game. So essentially, it gives you the option to have your unit move back a bit. It's not really an option, you have to do it, which gives the enemy the advantage of pushing forward, which in objective-based games I think will be really important. But then, from a benefit to the player whose unit gave ground, it's almost drawing the enemy into your lines a little and making flank charges a little bit easier, because it will, we assume, be your turn in the next turn. So I think it adds a lot of really interesting decision points for the charging unit. Do they essentially follow up? And we get to that in a second. Let's just hold. So as you can see, there's a substantial change to the combat rules. Blah, blah, blah. It may seem complex, but you get the gist of it pretty good. And they've got a little break test example here. So I think it'll become pretty natural once you start rolling the dice and getting used to it. But for now, yes, it does look a little tricky. Now that makes sense. It makes a lot of sense and adds some really interesting mechanics of the game. Great. All right, so run them down. We'll see psychology next week. Run them down. Pursuit. So when you win a combat, you have a range of choices depending on how the enemy reacts. You can restrain, so you have to pass the leadership test to avoid pursuit and instead reform your ranks for free. I'm pretty sure that's pretty similar from 8th edition. Follow up a unit that gave ground, re-entering combat a few inches forward. So there we go. It's probably a set few inches forward, 3, you might say. Or pursue a unit that flees or falls back. If you catch a fleeing unit, it's cut down and destroyed. If you catch a unit falling back, that is falling back in good order, combat begins again and the pursuer counts as having charged. So there's kind of 3 things that happen. You either you either restrain and don't follow up, so you're not moving into that trap, and you're also potentially not locking down a unit that you don't want to in combat. You can follow up a unit that gave ground, so you re-enter combat, but you're not getting any charge bonuses anymore, and you're not, you're then back in combat with them, so you can't get shot, benefits there. Or you pursue if they've fallen back in good order, where you get the attack results, but you don't run them down and kill them all. But if they're fleed, you do exactly that. Now, overrun. In the case that the victor has completely killed its target, it may make a full move directly forward. And if you end up in another combat, that counts as a fresh charge. That's pretty spicy. Clever use of overruns will have heavy cavalry licking their lips. So a few little changes here that I think makes this combat and the whole psychology and pursuing and falling back mechanic much more interesting, a lot more decision points, a lot more complexity in there, gradients of play. So that's fantastic. Now we then look at some assailment spells. For the combat phase, we've got Hammer Hand here and Soul Eater. So Hammer Hand, a single enemy unit the caster is engaged in combat with suffers 2d3 strength for hits with a nice little AP bonus there, but nothing outrageous. You'll kill a few models, that's fine. A single, and this is Soul Eater, a single enemy model the caster is engaged in combat with suffers a single strength 3 hit with the multiple wounds special rule and with no armor save permitted. That could be spicy. Ward and regeneration saves still good. So there we go, regeneration still in there. So casters just doing some things in combat. Now, that's it for this week's rules snapshot of the old world. Next week, we'll look at psychology, fear, terror, hatred, and all that good stuff. Now, a little asterisk around here, referred to as the fighting rank. Certain units have the ability to fight in deeper ranks or offer supplementary attacks. There we go, that's what we were talking about before. So there we have it, the combat phase. A few little differences there, mostly the front rank being the only one that fights for the majority of units. The extra attacks you get for having a wider rank than your opponent, and then all of the shenanigans around falling back and pursuing. I think all of these look like excellent rules, great changes, can't wait to play it. That's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to keep rolling those dice and getting fired up for fantasy.